Hi guys, Jeff at Slavens Racing. This video is about how to install the Slavens Mule Lucky fork cartridges in Xplor forks. And Xplor forks are used on the KTM EXCF models, XCWF models, the XCW 2-strokes, the EXC 2-strokes in other countries, the 6 days models, and then also the TE and FE Husqvarna models. So our Lucky kits, they're made by MX Tech, but they have my valving specs in them. So I do a lot of testing here in the mountains with another friend, a couple of friends actually. And so we test them for rocks and roots. Want them really compliant for that, but yet the stability of the Lucky kit, that it brings with high-speed stability through the whoops, G-outs, all those situations. I mean, these Lucky kits totally transform this fork. In stock form, it's mediocre at best. When revalved, it can definitely be improved a lot, but not even close, not even in the same ballpark as the Lucky kit. So you can see here I've already pulled the fork cap loose. You need a wrench like this. This is a factory wrench. We sell a Blue Motion Pro one on our website. I think it's, I don't know what it is, $12, $15, something like that. So you need that to remove the cap. And I highly recommend you don't do it with channel locks or a big crescent, because this is very soft material and you'll just nerf it up. It'll look like hell. So anyhow, I remove that and just let it drain. I mean, you don't have to let it drain, just dump it and go. And then down here on this end, I've already loosened this. So this takes a 17 millimeter Allen wrench, or you can buy a 17 millimeter bit like this to use in a ratchet. And that's the base valve, the stock base valve. And from there, I'm just going to pull the guts out. So there we go, that's the stock cartridge. I'm just going to leave it just like that, because I have everything that's on that cartridge is going to be replaced with the Lucky kit. The springs, the cap, cartridge, and everything. So from there, I'll show you how to install the Lucky kit. Guys, it's easiest to set the spring preload. The springs are included in the kit, and it's easiest to set the spring preload, before you install the Lucky cartridges. So there's a couple of easy ways to do that. So I've put the spring on the cartridge. It comes with a number of spacers like this. And I've put one down here on the bottom because you don't want the spring riding on this aluminum spring stop here, because when springs compress they twist, and it will eventually dig into that and chew it up, as well as put all that material into your oil and into your valving. So start out by putting the thinnest shim down here on the bottom. This slot here looks like it should have an O-ring on it. It does not for the Luckies. This same piece is used on other kits for like the 4CS and the AER forks. I believe one of those has the O-ring on it. But for the Lucky, for the Xplor fork, there's nothing there. So don't think we forgot to send you something. Just put that thin spring spacer down here on the bottom. It's a, what the hell is this material called? Basically a plastic ring. Put the spring on. Then you can see that the spring is really sloppy on there right now. So it has a negative preload. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure this distance between this plastic spring seat up here. You can move in a little bit so you can see this. And then the spring. So you can see I got a little over 9 millimeters right there. The instructions say to have 5 to 8 millimeters of preload, and I want to have closer to 5. So I've got a 9 millimeter gap to fill up. I need 5 millimeters of preload. So that means I need a 14 millimeter spacer if I want to hit 5 millimeters on the nose. Probably won't. So I'm going to take these two spacers and measure them. They're 15 millimeters, so 1 millimeter over, so I'm going to end up with 6 millimeters of preload, which is fine. Pull this back off. Put this on here. I'm just doing this to double check it. So you just kind of got to figure out where 0 is. Then I'm going to take a metric tape measure and measure from the left end of the spring to there. And it's 450. And the spring was, I measured the spring before, it was 453. So it's only got 3 millimeters of preload on it. I think I'll get some extras of these. I'm going to slip another one in there. Measure it again. Measure from the end of this spring down here. Yeah, it's hard to tell exactly where it needs to be, but it looks like it's going to be in that 5 to 6 millimeter range there. So I'm going to start there. It's easy enough. If you feel like you have too much preload later, you can just pull the cap off, pull out one of those spacers, put the cap back on. And spring preload on fork springs is a little tricky to measure because of all the distance you have here, and if you compress it slightly, well, you're going to change the whole reading. So I'm going to start right there. And then I'm going to take this back off. Set it aside for now. Pull the spring out. Set it aside. I'm going to leave this on for now. And then you can see these different flats here on this. So inside the fork on the far end on the dropout, there's matching female machining like this. So you have to make sure it drops in. And actually, sometimes it's easier to do that if you have the spring on it, because you can push on it a little easier. So I'm going to do that. Make it back up. Slide this whole cartridge assembly in here. Now this gives me something to push on here. You can also push on the spindle, but I'm going to try it this way. It feels like I looked out and the thing fell in there perfectly the first time. Usually you have to kind of jiggle it around with your finger on this end to get it to drop in all the way. So from there, I'm going to install the base valve assembly. I put just a slight bit of grease on this O-ring and a little on this O-ring and these threads. From there, it takes a 15 millimeter socket. I've got a deep well here. I don't think it has to be a deep well, but, and while I'm doing this, I'm going to push up on this far end down here to hold the cartridge in place. And I'm going to change over to a little bit longer ratchet. For you torqueaholics, I'm sorry you're out of luck on this one. You're going to torque out. They don't provide a torque spec from MX Tech on this. I wouldn't use it if they did. Just going to tighten it up. We'll check these settings later. So the cartridge is in. I mean, it's really that easy. It's just you yank out the old cartridge, slide in the new cartridge. Of course, set your preload beforehand. And then you got to go through the bleeding process. So I'm going to pull this cap back off. Set the spring aside, and now it's time for fluid. All right, now we're ready to put fluid in, and I use this Silcoline 02, which is about a 2.5 weight. It's very light, it's very high quality, it's kind of pricey, but I don't think there's any reason to chintz out on oil at this point. You've already spent a lot of money for this kit. Why not put quality oil into it? And the difference between this oil and say oil that costs half this much is this oil will last at least twice as long, and it's going to give you better performance throughout the entire life cycle of the fluid. So why not use the good stuff? So from here, I just hold the rod up, the spindle, and start pouring in. And right now it's about up to the top of the tube, and it's kind of bubbling and stuff. I'm going to stroke this. Make sure you hold your finger over the end of this, your thumb, because if it shoots up out of there, it will shoot the spring and the needle at the bottom out of there as well. You don't want that. It's right here to get that fluid. The fluid's not dropping much. I'm going to put a little more in here. It's dropped pretty slow. So just to get a better bleed on it, I'm going to put this cap back on here. And I'm going to lift up the outer tube. I'm going to screw this on until the O-ring is touching. I'm going to push down on it. I'm going to take it back out. Now the fluid's going all the way down. So now I get to add more fluid. Fill it all the way up again. Let's see what it feels like this time. See, it's still real loose. It's full of air. So I'm going to do that again. Now I can tell it's got a lot of resistance now. It's definitely getting the air out of the system. It's real low, so it's gone way down. So I'm going to fill it up to the top again. It's going to take around 500 or so cc's to fill up each side, 500 to 600. I'm still holding the spindle up with my finger. I'm going to pour fluid in until it comes all the way to the top of the inner tube. At this point, I don't have to screw the cap back onto the outer tube. I can just stroke it like this, and it's got a lot of resistance now, which means the air is pretty much out of the system. So I'm going to give it one more shot like this to really put the pressure on it, just to push the oil into all the little orifices and areas inside the cartridge. Now it's really got a lot of resistance. So it's telling me that I'm almost there. I'm going to stroke it some more. I'm not seeing any air bubbles. I'm not feeling any air bubbles. You can feel them because it'll move real quick on you. So at this stage, I'm going to remove the cap. I'm going to push this down. Yeah, it's got so much fluid in it, I can't even do that. suck some of it out. Alright, now I'm going to push this spindle all the way down to the bottom, so I'm holding my finger on that little center rod right there. That's what that looks like. You do not want that thing to shoot out of there. And you don't want to get oil down inside where that rod goes either. So now I'm going to draw it out to 135. It says 120 in the instructions. I'm going to start at 135. See if it uses all the stroke that way. But if the bottom's a little too easily, then I'll add some fluid later. It's real easy to add. It's a lot more difficult just to remove some. You can add it by removing the caps, or you can add it through the little bleed screw. Alright, so now I've got it at 135, but I need to hold onto the spindle and pull this all the way up to the top of its stroke, lower it back down, push the spindle in all the way, and I'm going to draw it out again. So I got some more out of there. Now, where'd that all come from? Between the inner tube and the outer tube, that space there between the two tubes. That's where I got that extra oil out of there. That's the correct way to get your oil height. If you don't do that, it's going to be way too high. Now I'm going to stick my spring in. It's already got the plastic spacer on the bottom, so it's not going to chew up the spring perch. Put my spacers on there. Screw the cap down. From there, you just pull down on the spring and you put a wrench onto this area, onto these flats, and then we've got a special tool for this, and you just lock it together. Sorry guys, Torqueaholics, I know you're going to stroke out on me here, but there's no torque spec for that either. Just tighten her down, don't get carried away. These are aluminum pieces, so that means they're softer than steel, so don't get carried away. Just lock it together, and then screw this cap back into the tube. Tighten it down. You're ready to mount it up on your bike. That's all there is to it, guys. Hope that works out for you. Don't forget to help on trail issues. Be a good trail ambassador. Join our YouTube channel. Follow us on Instagram. And like us on Facebook. We'd sure appreciate it. There'll be links below this video in the description area of all these products. That's all for now.